Alright. How's everyone doing tonight? I am getting ready to put out all the social media stuff. And soon we'll get started on Chapter 20. Alright, so posting there. Posting there. We will go over to here. Post here. And over here. And let's see, put it here too. And put it as well. Okie doke. Alright, we are just about done. Getting ready to read. So, just a minute. Okay. Okay. Here. Okay. Let's see here. That's great. Okay. And we are just going to get going. And let me change the scene back to the normal. There we go. And once again, welcome to another episode of Storytime with Kurt, where we're starting with Chapter 20 of Tom Swift and His Motorcycle. Previously on Tom Swift and His Motorcycle, basically, Tom made it home, was talking with his dad, and let him know about the whole robbery and all of that. But Tom is going to take it upon himself while his dad is going off on his own to find the three men who robbed him and maybe even Happy Harry. Chapter 20. Eradicate Saws Wood. The farmer's family, including the son who was a deputy sheriff, was glad to see Tom. Jed said that he had been on the job ever since the mysterious robbery of Tom had taken place, but though he had seen many red automobiles, he had no trace of the three men. From Dunkirk, Tom From Dunkirk, Tom went back over the route he had taken in going from Pompville to Centerford and made some inquiries in the neighborhood of the church shed, where he had taken shelter. The locality was sparsely settled, however, and no one could give any clues to the robbers. The young inventor next made a trip over the lonely sandy road where he had met with the tramp, Happy Harry. But there were even fewer houses near that stretch than around the church, so he got no satisfaction there. Tom spent the night at the country inn and resumed his search the next morning, but with no results. The men had apparently completely disappeared, leaving no traces behind them. I may as well go home, thought Tom as he was riding his motorcycle along a pleasant country road. Dad may be worried, and perhaps something has turned up in Shopton that will aid me. If there isn't, I'm going to start out again in a few days in another direction. There was no news in Shopton, however. Tom found his father scarcely able to work, so worried over the loss of his most important invention. 2 weeks passed. The young machinist taking trips of several days' duration to different points near his home in the hopes of discovering something, but he was unsuccessful. And in the meanwhile, no reassuring word was received from the lawyers in Washington. Mr. Crawford wrote that no move had yet been made by the thieves to take out patent papers, and while this, in a sense, was some aid to Mr. Swift, still he could not proceed on his own account to protect his new motor. All that could be done was to await the first movement on the part of the scoundrels. "I think I'll try a new plan tomorrow, Dad," announced Tom one night, when he and his father had talked over again, for perhaps the 20th time, the happenings of the last few weeks. "What is it, Tom?" asked the inventor. "Well, I think I'll take a week's trip on my machine. I'll visit all the small towns around here, but instead of asking in houses for news of the tramp or his confederates, I'll go to the police and constables. I'll ask if they've arrested any tramps recently, and if they have, I'll ask them to let me see the hobo prisoners." "Well, what good would that do?" "I'll tell you. I have an idea that though the burglar who got in here may not be a regular tramp, yet he disguises himself like one at times, and may be known to other tramps. If I can get on the trail of Happy Harry, as he calls himself, I may locate the other men. Tramps would be very likely to remember such a peculiar chap as Happy Harry, and they'll tell me when they had the last scene Wow, I completely botched that. Let's try that one again. Tramps would be very likely to remember such a peculiar chap as Happy Harry, and they will tell me where they had last seen him. Then I'll have a starting point." "Well, that may be a good plan," assented Mr. Swift. "At any rate, it'll do no harm to try. A tramp locked up in a country police station will very likely be willing to talk. Go ahead with that scheme, Tom, but don't get into any danger. How long will you be away?" "I don't know. A week, perhaps. Maybe longer. I'll take plenty of money with me and stop at country hotels overnight." Tom lost no time in putting his plan into execution. He packed some clothes in a grip, which he attached to the rear of his motorcycle, and then, having said goodbye to his father, started off. The first 3 days he met with no success. He located several tramps in country lockups where they had been seen begging or loitering, but none of them knew Happy Harry or had ever heard of a tramp answering his description. "He ain't one of us. Yous can make up your mind to that," said one hobo who Tom had interviewed. "No real knight of the highway goes around in a disguise. We leave that to the storybook detectives. I'm the real article, I am, and I don't know Happy Harry. But for that matter, any of us is happy enough in the summertime if we don't strike a burg like this, where they jugs you for panhandling." In general, Tom found the tramp willing enough to answer his questions, though some were sullen and returned only surly growls to his inquiry. "I guess I'll have to give it up and go back home," he decided one night. But there was a small town not many miles from Shopton. Sorry for the thump. which he had not yet visited, and he resolved to try there before returning. And I just realized something. Yep. That's okay. Sorry, gotta take a drink. Wow. That's gonna get cut out of the audio. I'll start that paragraph over again. I guess I'll have to give it up and go back home, he decided one night. But there was a small town not many miles from Shopton, which he had not yet visited, and he resolved to try there before returning. Accordingly, the next morning found him inquiring the police authorities in Medton. But no tramps had been arrested in the last month, and no one had seen anything of a tramp like Happy Harry or 3 mysterious men in an automobile. Tom was beginning to despair. Riding along a silent road that passed through a strip of woods, he was trying to think of some new line of procedure when the silence of the highway that hitherto had resounded only with the muffled explosions of his machine was broken by several exclamations. "Now, Boomerang! You might as well start now as later," Tom heard a voice saying, a voice he recognized well. "You gotta do this here work, and there ain't no getting out of it. This wood had gotta be sawed, and I have to saw it. But just like you to go back on your old friend Eradicate in this fashion. Never could tell what you were gonna do next, and I can't now. Come on now, let's get this here sawmill started." Tom shut off the power and leaped from his wheel. From the woods at his left came the protesting hee-haw of a mule. "Boomerang and Eradicate Sampson!" exclaimed the young inventor. "What can they be doing here?" He leaned his motorcycle against the fence and advanced toward where he had heard Eradicate's voice. In a little clearing he saw him. Eradicate was presiding over a portable sawmill worked by a treadmill on the incline of which was the mule, its ears laid back, and an unmistakable expression of anger on its face. "Why, Rad, what are you doing?" cried Tom. "Oh, good Lord, if it isn't young Mr. Swift. Howdy, how you doing? I'm just trying to saw some wood to make a living, but Boomerang, he don't want to help." And with that, Eradicate looked reproachfully at the animal. "What seems to be the trouble, and how'd you come to own this sawmill?" asked Tom. "I'll tell you, Mr. Swift. Sit right here on this log, and I'll explain it to you." "Well, the last time I saw you, you were preparing to go into the grass-cutting business," went on Tom. "Yes, sir, that's right, so I was. You got a good memory, you have. But it's this way. Grass ain't growing quick enough, and so I traded off the lawnmower and bought this here mill. But now it won't go, and I'm sure in trouble." And once more Eradicate Sampson looked indignantly at Boomerang. And that's the end of chapter 20. So we're going to do a couple things here. I'm going to go to the chat room. We're going to start recording. So I'm going to have to take that chapter off of the video. That's awesome. That'll be great. So happy about that. And how you doing, Skippy? And Commander Root? How you guys doing? Good to see you in the chat room. Thank you for showing up. Very mellow now. Nice. You're not on a treadmill or anything? Okay. All right, so just to let you guys know what we're doing with this, because we're coming to the end of the book. What we're going to do is we're going to read 3 chapters tonight. And then on Thursday, when I record the next stream, we'll be reading chapter 23 and chapter 24. And those are the last chapters. And we'll just I'll give kind of my take on the book, what I thought of the book as a whole, and all of that. And then next week, I think we'll be starting a new book. Haven't quite figured it out yet. I've got some suggestions, but we'll see what happens. So, okay. Let's go back here. And we'll go back to story time. With the fireplace and all that. Previously on Tom Swift and his motorcycle. Basically, Tom was out on the road in chapter 20 looking for Happy Harry and came up short. Found nothing except he bumped into Raticate and Boomerang. And Raticate was running a sawmill and Boomerang was not cooperating. Chapter 21. Eradicate gives a clue. Tell me all about it, urged Tom sympathetically, for he had a friendly feeling towards the man. Well, began Eradicate, I sure thought I was going to make some money cutting grass, especially after you fixed my mower, but it appeared like nobody wanted any grass cut. So I traveled all over, and I couldn't get any jobs. Now, me and Boomerang have to eat, so it doesn't matter if he's contrary. I had to look for some new work. I traded the lawnmower off for a cross-cut saw, but that was such hard work that I had to give it up. Then I got a chance to buy this outfit cheap, and I bought it. Eradicate then went on to tell how he had purchased the portable sawmill from a man who had no further use for it, and how he had managed to transport it from a distant village to the spot where Tom had met him. There, he had secured permission to work a piece of woodland on shares, sawing up the smaller trees into cordwood. He had started in well enough, cutting down considerable timber, for the man was a willing worker, but when he tried to start his sawmill, he met with trouble. I counted on Boomerang helping me, he said to Tom. All he has to do is walk on that treadmill and keep going. That makes the saw go round, and I saw the wood. But the trouble is I can't get Boomerang to move. I tried every means I know, and he won't go. Talked to him, and I talked harsh, I talked kind. I beat him with a club, I rubbed his ears soft, and all he did was, well, I mean, he did like the ears soft thing, but he won't go. Fed him carrots, and I gave him sugar, and I even starved him, but he won't go. I've been trying for 3 days now to get him started, and not a stick have I sawed. The man I'm working with on shares, he got mad, and he said if I don't saw wood pretty soon, he's going to get another mill. Now, I ask you, don't I have lots of trouble? You certainly seem to have, agreed Tom, but why is Boomerang so obstinate? Usually on a treadmill, a horse or a mule has to work whether they like it or not. If they don't keep moving, the platform slides out from under them, and they don't come back against the back bar. That's what happened to Boomerang, declared Eradicate. He done backed up to the bar, and there he stayed. Tom went over and looked at the mill. The outfit was an old one and had seen much service, but the trained eye of the young inventor saw that it could still be used effectively. Boomerang watched Tom, and as though he was aware that something unusual was about to happen. Here I've gone and invested all my money in this mill, complained Eradicate, and I haven't sawed up a single stick. If I wasn't so kind-hearted, I'd chastise that mule, and that's what I'd do. And Tom said nothing. He was stooping down, looking at the gearing that connected the treadmill with the shaft which revolved the saw. Suddenly, he uttered an exclamation. Rad, have you been monkeying with this machinery? He asked. Me? No, Mr. Swift. I wouldn't take it. I just got it from the man I bought it off of. It worked when he had it, but he used a horse. It's all due to the contrariness of Boomerang, and if I... Nope. It's not the mule's fault at all, exclaimed Tom. The mill is out of gear. The tread is locked, that's all. The man you bought it off probably did it so you could haul it along the road. I'll have it fixed for you in a few minutes. Wait until I get some tools. From the bag on his motorcycle, Tom got his implements. First, he unlocked the treadmill so that the inclined platform on which the animal slowly walked could revolve. No sooner had he done this than Boomerang, feeling the slats under his hoofs moving away, started forward. With a rattle, the treadmill slid around. "Good Lord, it's going!" cried Eradicate, delightfully. "It sure is going!" And he added, and he saw the mule with nimble feet send the revolving, endless string of slats around and around. "But the saw doesn't move, Mr. Swift." You sure are pretty smart at fixing it as much as you have, but I reckon it's too busted to ever saw any wood. I got bad luck, that's all." "Nonsense!" exclaimed Tom. "The sawmill will be going in a moment. All I have to do is throw it into gear. See here, Rad? When you want the saw to go, you just throw this handle forward. That makes the gears mesh." "What's that about mesh?" asked Eradicate. "I mean, it makes the cogs fit together, see?" And Tom pressed the lever. In an instant, with a musical whir, the saw began revolving. "Hooray, there it goes! Golly, that saw does move!" cried the man. He seized a stick of wood, and in a trice it was sawed through. In a trice. I wonder if that means, like, in 3 seconds? I don't know. "Woo!" yelled Eradicate. "I'm saved now. Bless you, Mr. Swift. You're certainly a wonder." "Now, I'll show you how it works," went on Tom. "When you want to stop Boomerang, you just pull the handle. That locks the tread, and he can't move it." And suiting the actions to his words, Tom stopped the mill. "Then," he went on, "when you want him to move, you pull the handle this way." And he showed him how to do it. In a moment, the mule was moving again. Then Tom illustrated how to throw the saw in and out of gear, and in a few minutes the sawmill was in full operation, with a most energetic man feeding in logs to be cut up into stove lengths. "You ought to have an assistant, Rad," said Tom, after he'd watched the work for a while. "You could get more done then, and move on to some other wood patch." "That's right, Mr. Swift, so I had. But I tried and I couldn't get any. I asked several men, they'd rather whitewash and clean chicken coops. I guess I'll have to go it alone. I asked a man yesterday if he'd like to pitch in and help, but he said he didn't like to work. He was a tramp, and he had the nerve to ask me for money." "You didn't give it to him, I hope." "No, indeedy. But he did come so close to me that I was scared that he might take it from me, so I kept hold of my club. He sure was a bad-looking tramp, and he kept laughing like he was happy." "What's that?" cried Tom, struck by the words of the man. "Did he have a thick brown beard?" "That's what he had," answered Eradicate, pausing in the midst of his work. "He sure was a funny sort of tramp. His hands looked like he'd never worked, and he had a funny blue ring. One finger, only it wasn't a regular ring. It pushed right into his skin, like a man I seen at the circus once, all covered with funny figures." Tom leaped to his feet. "Which finger was the blue ring tattooed on?" he asked, and he waited anxiously for the answer. "Let me see. It was on his right. No, it was on his little finger on his left hand." "Are you sure, Rad?" "Sure, Mr. Swift. I took particular notice, 'cause he carried a stick in that same hand." "It must be my man, Happy Harry," exclaimed Tom, half aloud. "Which way did he go, Rad, after he left you?" "He went up the lake shore. He asked me if I knowed anybody at the old big house up there, nobody lived in it, and I said I did. Then he left, and I was glad of it." "Which house did you mean, Rad?" "Why, the old mansion where General Harkness used to live, before the war. There's nobody lived in there for some years now, and it's deserted. Maybe a lot of tramps stays there now, and that's where this man's going." "Maybe," assented Tom, who was all excitement now. "Just where is this old house, Rad?" "Away up the head of Lake Carlopa. I used to work there before the war, and it's been a good many years since quality folks lived there. Why? What'd you want to see that man for, Mr. Swift? Yeah, I did, and very badly too. I think he's the very person I want. But don't say anything about it. I'm going to take a trip up to that strange mansion. Maybe I'll get on the trail of Happy Harry and the men who robbed me. I'm much obliged to you, Rad, for this information. It's a good clue, I think. Strange that you should meet the very tramp I've been searching for. Well, I'm obliged to you too, Mr. Swift, for fixing my sawmill. That's all right. What you told me more than pays for what I did, Rad. Well, I'm going home now to tell Dad, and then I'm going to start out. Yesterday, you said it was. You saw Happy Harry? Well, I'll get right after him, and leaving somewhat surprised, very much delighted man behind him, Tom mounted his motorcycle and started for home at a fast pace. End of chapter 21. Okay. And we're back in the chat room. S1 Faka, who's probably a bot, but I don't care. So we got one more chapter to go. I believe that's correct. Yep, one more chapter. And that'll do it for tonight. It's going to be short. That's okay. Hope you're enjoying yourself, Skippy. Do you have any suggestions for the next book? We had one of the suggestions for the next book was War of the Worlds, because of Halloween and whatnot coming. But I don't know. Yeah, some Lovecraft short stories. I just don't know if we'd be able to finish in time. That'd be a little bit of my concern. And given the release schedule of the podcast, I don't think that's going to work. I don't know. I just don't know. Because the podcast is single chapters, and we're releasing 3 a week, which means this book will be 2 months of release. Because it's 24 chapters, it'll be 8 weeks. So that brings us to, it just launched last night, so that brings us to mid-December. So I don't know. We're gonna have to see how that works out. So all right, so let's get back into it for the last chapter of the night. Go back to Storytime View. Previously on chapter 21 of Tom Swift and his motorcycle. Basically, Tom ran into Eradicate and Boomerang again, and it turns out Eradicate had seen Happy Harry. Chapter 22. The Strange Mansion. Dad, I've got a clue, exclaimed Tom, hurrying into the house late that afternoon, following a quick trip from where he had met Eradicate with his sawmill. A good clue, and I'm going to start early in the morning to run it down. Wait a minute now, Tom, cautioned his father slowly. You know what happens when you get excited. Nothing good was ever done in a hurry. Well, I can't help being excited, Dad. I think I'm on the trail of those scoundrels. I almost wish I could start tonight. Suppose you tell me all about it, and Mr. Swift laid aside a scientific book he was reading. Whereupon Tom told of his meeting with the man and what Eradicate had said about the tramp. But he may not be the same Happy Harry you're looking for, interposed Mr. Swift. Tramps who don't like to work and who have a jolly disposition, and also those who ask for money and have designs tattooed on their hands, are very common. Oh, but I'm sure this is the same one, declared Tom. He wants to stay in this neighborhood until he locates his Confederates. That's why he's hanging around. Now, I have an idea that the deserted mansion where Eradicate used to work, and which once housed General Harkness and his family, is the rendezvous of this gang of thieves. You are taking a great deal for granted, Tom. I don't think so, Dad. I've got to assume something, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. At any rate, I'm going to try if you'll let me. Well, what do you mean to do? I want to go to that deserted mansion and see what I can find. If I can locate the thieves, well, you may run into danger. Then you admit I might be on the right track, Dad? Not at all. And Mr. Swift smiled at the quick manner in which Tom turned the tables on him. I admit there may be a band of tramps in that house. Very likely there is. Almost any deserted place would be attractive to them. But they may not be the ones you seek. In fact, I hardly see how they could be. The men who stole my model and patent papers are wealthy. They would not be very likely to stay in deserted houses. Perhaps some of the scoundrels whom they hired might, and through them I can get on the track of the principals. Well, there is something in that, admitted Mr. Swift. Then may I go, Dad? I suppose so. We must leave nothing untried to get back the stolen model and papers. But I don't want you to run any risks. If you would only take someone with you. There's your chum, Ned Newton. Perhaps he would go. No, I'd rather work it alone, Dad. I'll be careful. Besides, Ned couldn't get away from the bank. I may have to be gone a week, and he has no motorcycle. I can manage all right. Tom was off bright and early. He had carefully laid his plans and had decided that he would not go direct to Pineford, which was the nearest village to the old Harkness mansion. If those fellows are in hiding, they'll probably keep watch on who comes to the village, thought Tom. The arrival of someone on a motorcycle will be sure to be reported to them, and they may skip out. I've got to come up from another direction, so I think I'll circle around and reach the mansion from the stretch of woods on the north. He had inquired from Eradicate as to the lay of the land and had a good general idea of it. He knew there was a patch of woodland on one side of the mansion, while the other sides were open. I may not be able to ride through the woods, mused Tom, but I'll take my machine as close as I can and walk the rest of the way. Once I discover whether or not the gang is in the place, I'll know what to do. To follow out the plan he had laid down for himself meant that Tom must take a roundabout way. It would necessitate being a whole day on the road before he would be near the head of Lake Carlopa, where the Harkness house was located. The lake was a large one, and Tom had never been to the upper end. When he was within a few miles of Pineford, Tom took a road that branched off and went around it. Stopping at night in a lonely farmhouse, he pushed on to the next morning, hoping to get to the woods that night. But a puncture to one of the tires delayed him, and after that was repaired, he discovered something wrong with his batteries. He had to go 5 miles out of his way to get new cells, and it was dusk when he came to the stretch of woods which he knew lay between him and the old mansion. Well, I don't fancy starting in there at night, said Tom to himself. Guess I better stay somewhere around here until morning and then venture in. But the question is, where to stay? The country was deserted, and for a mile or more he had seen no houses. He kept on for some distance farther, the dusk falling rapidly, and when he was about to turn back to retrace his way to the last farmhouse he had passed, he saw a slab shanty at the side of the road. Well, that's better than nothing, provided they take me in for the night, murmured Tom. I'm going to ask anyhow. He found the shanty to be inhabited by an old man who made a living burning charcoal. The place was not very attractive, but Tom didn't mind that, and finding the charcoal burner a kindly old fellow, soon made a bargain with him to remain all night. Tom slept soundly in spite of his strange surroundings, and after a simple breakfast in the morning, inquired of the old man the best way of penetrating the forest. "You'd best strike right along the old wood road," said the charcoal burner. "That leads right to the lake, and I think it'll take you where you want to go. The old mansion's not far from the lake shore." "Near the lake, eh?" mused Tom as he started off, after thanking the old fellow. "Now I wonder if I'd better try to get to it from the water or the land side." He found it impossible to ride fast in the old wood road, and when he judged he was so close to the lake that the noise of the motorcycle might be heard, he shut off the power and walked along, pushing it. It was hard traveling, and he felt weary, but he kept on, and about noon was rewarded by a sight of something glittering through the trees. "That's the lake!" Tom exclaimed, half aloud. "I'm almost there." A little later, having hidden his motorcycle in a clump of bushes, he made his way through the underbrush and stood on the shore of Lake Carlopa. Cautiously, Tom looked about him. It was getting well on in the afternoon, and the sun was striking across the broad sheet of water. Tom glanced up along the shore. Something amid a clump of trees caught his eyes. It was the chimney of a house. The young inventor walked a little distance along the lake shore. Suddenly, he saw looming up in the forest a large building. It needed but a glance to show that it was falling into ruins and had no signs of life about it. Nor, for that matter, was there any life in the forest around him, or on the lake that stretched out before him. "I wonder if that could be the place," whispered Tom, for somehow the silence of the place was getting on his nerves. "It must be it," he went on. "It's just as Rad described it." He stood looking at it, the sun striking full on the mysterious mansion hidden there amid the trees. Suddenly, as Tom looked, he heard a putt-putt of a motorboat. He turned to one side and saw, putting out from a little dock that he had not noticed before, a small craft. It contained one man, and no sooner had the young inventor caught a glimpse of him than he cried out, "That's the man who jumped our fence and escaped!" Then, before the occupant of the boat could catch sight of him, Tom turned and fled back into the bushes, out of view. End of chapter 22. Okay. So, that is pretty short. I mean, that was like half an hour for those 3 chapters. Okay, Skippy, so we have 2 more chapters, and that's the end of the book. So, clearly, Tom is on his way. So, let's see. Okay. So, Skippy, since I believe you're the only human in the chat room right now, I just want to say thank you for your support on this whole project thing. It's oh jeez, I don't know why I did that. It's cool that you have supported this whole thing. There's been some good comments from folks, and I really do appreciate it. I'd love to get more people in the live room, but I don't think that's necessarily going to be a thing, particularly given that the streams are shorter. I'm not gonna do a stream where I'm gonna be reading for 2 hours back to back. I mean, that's a lot of talking. So I think that'll do it for tonight. Like I said, I really appreciate it, and we'll see you Thursday night for the last chapter. The last chapters. Have a good night. See you around, Skippy.